Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope you're having a wonderful and peaceful day today. Today, we continue an incredibly touching story. After days of fear and separation, Tu Nha is finally reunited with Kiet and their daughter in the most emotional way. But what happens next reveals a beautiful circle of kindness that connects two families across time. A moment so heartwarming, it will stay with you long after the video ends. If you love stories full of emotion and humanity like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. The wooden door creaked softly as the evening light filtered through the gaps. Tu Nha stood there, still weak but steadier now, her heart beating with a mixture of exhaustion and overwhelming hope. Mrs. Hugh's gentle hand rested on her shoulder, offering silent strength. "He's coming, child. Just a little longer." Outside, the sound of a motorbike engine grew louder, cutting through the quiet mountain air. Kiet killed the engine and leaped off, his daughter clinging tightly to his back. The moment he crossed the threshold, time seemed to slow. His eyes found Tu Nha's across the small room. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then, everything broke at once. "Tu Nha!" Kiet's voice cracked as he rushed forward. Tu Nha took two unsteady steps and fell into his arms. He held her like she might disappear again, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped protectively around her waist. Her face pressed against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of home mixed with dust from the long journey. Tears she had held back for days finally spilled over. Their little daughter didn't wait. She slipped from Kiet's back and threw herself against her mother's legs, small arms wrapping around Tu Nha's waist with surprising strength. "Mommy, Mommy, I missed you so much." The child's voice trembled, muffled against her mother's clothes. Tu Nha bent down despite the pain, pulling her daughter into the embrace. The three of them stood there in the middle of Mrs. Hugh's humble wooden house, a tangled knot of relief, love, and unspoken fear finally released. Mrs. Hugh stood quietly to the side, her aged eyes glistening. She watched the reunion without interrupting, a soft smile on her lips. When the first wave of emotion settled, she spoke gently, recounting how she had found Tu Nha unconscious at the foot of the mountain, carried her home, fed her porridge, and tended to her wounds for 2 long days. Kiet bowed deeply, his voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you, Ma'am. I don't know how we can ever repay what you've done for my wife." Tu Nha kept one arm around her daughter and reached out to hold Kiet's hand. The warmth of his palm grounded her. For the first time since waking up in this strange house, she felt truly safe. Yet as the initial joy faded, a new feeling stirred. Something about this place felt hauntingly familiar. Her eyes wandered across the wooden walls, the bamboo bed, the corner where herbs hung drying. "This house," Tu Nha murmured, her voice hesitant. "It feels like I've been here before." Mrs. Hugh's smile deepened with understanding. She invited them to sit. As golden light poured through the small window, she began to tell the story. She spoke of a young girl named Tu Un, the girl who once saved Kiet in his time of greatest need, who had lived in this very house, who was driven away by hardship, and whom Mrs. Hugh had later adopted as her own daughter, sending her to medical school. Tu Nha's eyes widened. The pieces slowly clicked into place. The kindness that had once flowed from Tu and Kiet had now returned through Mrs. Hugh to save her. A full circle of compassion, quiet and profound, that no one could have predicted. Kiet listened in silence, his hand never leaving Tu Nha's. Their daughter sat quietly in her mother's lap, sensing the weight of the moment, even if she didn't fully understand. Who handed over several bundles of precious herbs. Take these home and brew them. They will help Tu Nha recover fully. Her voice was simple, without seeking praise. Kiet and Tu Nha thanked her again and again, their words heavy with genuine emotion. In that small wooden house, surrounded by the scent of herbs and the warmth of unexpected kindness, the weight of the past few days began to lift. But the sun was setting. It was time to go home. Mrs. Hugh walked them to the door, waving gently as Kiet helped Tu Nha onto the motorbike. Their daughter sat safely between them. As the engine started, Tu Nha looked back one last time at the kind woman who had saved her. She raised her hand in silent thanks. The journey home along the winding mountain road felt different this time. Tu Nha leaned against Kiet's back, her arms wrapped around him and their daughter. The wind brushed her face, carrying away the last traces of fear. When they finally arrived at their half-built wooden house, nestled among the bamboo trees, the reality of home embraced them once more. The motorbike's engine faded into the quiet night as they arrived at their half-built wooden house deep in the bamboo forest. The familiar scent of fresh timber and damp earth welcomed them. Construction beams stood like silent guardians under the half-finished roof. Tu Nha stepped down slowly, her body still aching, but her heart felt lighter than it had in days. Kiet helped her inside, one arm securely around her waist. Their daughter skipped ahead, laughing as she ran across the wooden floor they had laid together just weeks before. The little girl's joy echoed through the open space, filling the gaps between the unfinished walls. Once they settled on a simple mat in the main room, Tu Nha leaned against Kiet's shoulder. The warmth of his body grounded her. Their daughter curled up in her mother's lap, refusing to let go. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the soft sound of night insects and distant rain could be heard. Then Tu Nha began to speak, her voice quiet but steady. She told Kiet everything, how she had been chased by robbers on the mountain path, how fear had driven her to the edge of a cliff, and how in that desperate moment she had almost chosen to jump rather than be taken. Kiet listened without interrupting, his jaw tight, his hand never leaving hers. When she described waking up in Mrs. Hugh's house, bruised and confused, his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I thought I might never see you and our daughter again," Tu Nha whispered, her fingers tracing the lines on Kiet's palm. "But that kind woman, she carried me home, fed me, stayed by my side when I was most afraid." Kiet pulled her closer, pressing his lips to her forehead. "You're here now. That's all that matters." His voice was rough with emotion. Their daughter looked up, sensing the heaviness, and hugged her mother tighter. "Mommy is safe," the little girl said softly, as if trying to convince herself. As the rain began to fall gently outside, Mrs. Hugh's words echoed in Tu Nha's mind. The story of Tu Un, the girl who once saved Kiet, who once lived in that same wooden house, and who was now connected to them through Mrs. Hugh's kindness. A beautiful, unexpected circle had closed. The same compassion that flowed years ago had returned to save Tu Nha when she needed it most. Kiet seemed to understand without words. He held his wife and daughter close, the three of them forming their own small circle of love amid the half-built house. Outside, raindrops pattered on the new roof beams. Inside, the simple warmth of family healed what medicine alone could not. Tu Nha looked around at the wooden structure they had been building together, the future they had dreamed of. Despite the bruises and the fear she had carried, she felt grateful. The hardship had led her to Mrs. Hugh, and through that kindness, she had found her way back to the people she loved most. From now on, she whispered against Kiet's chest, we won't be apart anymore. Kiet nodded, his eyes full of quiet promise. Never again. Their daughter had already fallen asleep in Tu Nha's arms, a peaceful smile on her small face. The rain continued falling softly, washing away the dust of the past few days. In the dim light of their unfinished home, surrounded by timber beams and the scent of fresh wood, the family sat together, wounded but whole, broken but healing. Tu Nha closed her eyes, breathing in the moment. Some wounds heal with medicine, others heal with love, with kindness from strangers, and with the simple, unbreakable bond of coming home. In the gentle rain, with her husband's arm around her and her daughter's steady breathing against her chest, Tu Nha finally allowed herself to rest. Tomorrow they would continue building their house. Tonight, they simply held each other, proof that even in the darkest moments on a cold mountain slope, light could find its way back through the kindness of others. And so, the circle remained unbroken. In this emotional continuation, Tu Nha is finally reunited with her husband Kiet and their young daughter at Mrs. Hugh's humble wooden house. Tears flow as Kiet holds his wife tightly, while their daughter clings to her mother, overwhelmed with joy after days of fear and separation. Mrs. Hugh gently shares how she found Tu Nha unconscious and cared for her. Then comes the surprising revelation. This same house once belonged to Tu Un, the girl who saved Kiet years ago. A beautiful circle of kindness quietly connects their two families. As the sun sets, the family returns to their half-built home in the bamboo forest. In the gentle rain, Tu Nha recounts her terrifying escape from the robbers. Safe in Kiet's arms with their daughter sleeping peacefully nearby, Tu Nha realizes that love, compassion, and the warmth of family can heal even the deepest wounds.